Hi, everyone. Welcome, and I want to talk a little bit about big shifts going on in the world. I love that this conference is about big shifts because that's what I think is happening in the world is we're shifting from a world of offline to a world of online, digitally connected people, things, objects, and ideas all around the world. My presentation today, I think the big takeaways I want for people to understand is we need a new way to design for this massively disrupted world, and we have the tools that we can do that, and as designers we can really contribute to developing better products and services for people in this new world.
So my presentation is about how to design for a world of disruptive shifts. We have it in the title here today, Shift and Disrupt, and I want to talk a little bit about some things that I've learned from my practice as a consulting and advisory firm. We work for clients around the world. I don't think anyone has the absolute answer on how to do this, but at least I want to share some of the ideas that we've built our business around, and maybe they can be useful for you today. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you some thoughts on how to design in a world of disruptive shifts, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about what those disruptive shifts are. What does this mean? And when we talk about design, I want to talk about it in terms of problem solving. I think Piero put it really well, that we're not just stylists. Style is part of solving a problem. Aesthetics are important, but we want to look about building systems that deal with problems. And today, a lot of the problems we're faced with as designers are very complex and they're dynamic. That is to say, they're very big with a lot of moving parts and they don't stay still. They keep changing. The situation or the need changes over time. So if we're going to solve these kind of problems as designers, we need to think about where will the users of our solutions be tomorrow, the day after, in the future. We can't just design for today because by the time we get our product or service out there, today is gone and our solution is already obsolete. So, since we live in this world of constant disruption, which I'll make my case why I believe this is true, how do we design for it? I want to give you a little bit of context first before we get right into the topic. And as I've been thinking about it more and more, this context is about what I do for a living day to day in my business. And I realize Claro Partners has been in existence for about 5 years. And some of the things I want to explain about my company are also things that we believe help us be able to deal with complexity, with dynamic change, with these disruptions in the world. As mentioned, our business is really framed as being a business innovation and service design firm. For us, those two things are very closely related. If you're going to innovate and make a change in the world, the underlying business model may need to change as well. And designers can participate in this. Business modeling, the shape of a business behind a product or a service is not something scary that you can't be involved in, that you can't participate in, that you can't contribute to and influence. And then, as a service design firm, service design is a very broad term. For us, we're very much at the upfront part of it. We design what that experience should look like. We give design briefs, design principles, we give narratives to show key success factors that we give to our corporate clients, and then internally, their design, engineering, technology, business, marketing factors decide what it's really going to look like. So we really frame what the opportunity is and what the need is for people out there in the world. So that's how we relate to service design. And the way we do that is by combining these three classic circles. And I think what's really interesting to think about how we do that. So we bring together business strategy, people who have MBAs, analysts who really can deconstruct the marketplace, deconstruct a business's strengths and weaknesses. We look at experience design. How do we design what a future state should look like? How do we communicate an opportunity that can go viral inside of an organization? And really, we kind of start with social science. Anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, really looking at how individuals, groups of people, and whole cultures take on information, want to achieve certain tasks, what motivates them, what their desires are, what are their fears, their frustrations. We bring these things all together to really try to understand how we can make meaningful changes in the world. And I want to give a couple examples about how we do that, a couple projects I'm working on right now. The first is with the Gates Foundation, which you may be familiar with. They're working right now with World Health Organization and UNICEF to redesign vaccination cards to keep people aware of the vaccinations their children need, especially over those first 14 to 24 months of their life. We're working with a design firm, we're working with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, Gates, a lot of other stakeholders, and across that, we're looking at it in terms of the social science. What are the actors? Who are the different people involved in this? There's the child, the parent, the local health care giver, the international organizations that are in charge of vaccination. So we really want to understand all those different players. From an experience design perspective, we want to say, what does that look like today? How do we deconstruct today's experience, and where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities to improve that? And then using our design capabilities to say, this is what some futures could look like. And then business strategy, even with Gates, there's business strategy. We want to look at what makes sense financially, what is sustainable, what can your organizational practices actually support. So that's one example how we do that. And another example, recently worked with an automobile manufacturer, and they really wanted to understand the overall customer journey of their customers. So again, we wanted to look at the car buyers, car owners, the dealership, different levels of people in the dealership, from owner to salespeople to repair people, and really understand that ecosystem of how people are interacting. Make some recommendations, look at some other models out there. We looked at models in other industries to say how is retail changing in other ways, and how could this improve the experience that you currently have for your customers. And then ultimately we have to work with them to say who's going to pay for this. You know, what kind of a return do we get on that kind of investment? Because as designers, a cool idea is not a cool idea unless it helps both the consumer and the business that's trying to reach them. One of the things we try to do, because this is a world that's very complex and very dynamic, is we try to create a little complexity and dynamism inside of our company. It makes our life harder, but it also makes our life easier. We're about 25 people, and we've got people from 12 or 13 different countries by design. We've wanted different cultural backgrounds, different languages for how people think about things, as well as different kinds of diverse educational and work experiences. Anthropology and design, engineering and product design, service and interaction design, business analysis and modeling. We really want to have all these different points of view kind of colliding. Sometimes we have to talk to each other about the vocabulary we're using. When you say the word experience, what do you mean by that? When you say the word create, what do you mean by that? When you talk about the customer, who are you talking about? But what it does is also all those different points of view help us see and really open up, and as Piero said, maybe be stupid. We cross against those different practice areas from one to another, and it really opens up new ways of seeing things. So I really think this is important when you're working in groups, to get as much diversity in point of view and thinking and background and experience as possible. And the other thing we do to complicate our lives at Claro, but also I think helps overall to design for a world of disruption, is we have 3 different kinds of projects that are really, really different. So in the middle are the more classic bespoke client projects. Those are projects that run 12 to 16 weeks. The client comes to us with a brief, usually a bad brief, about what they want to achieve. We come up with a solution, we pitch the solution or the approach, and then we go try to discover it. Of course, we don't know what the answer is, but we're confident we'll find a way to get there. Classic, consulting, design agency kind of work. But what we do on one side is we say, hey, here's something we think is interesting to look at. Perhaps it's the idea of trust. Perhaps it's the idea of on-demand services. And we'll go out and we get 5 or 6 clients to join us. We convince them to fund this work, and we go out and explore something new. Not necessarily looking for a solution, just looking for opportunities and understanding what is the landscape of that space really like. So that's really just opening up and saying, what if, and how do we make sense of these things going on in the world? And on the other side, we work with startups. Some of you may see this already, and I've had some conversations already. Much of the real innovation happening in the world today is not happening inside corporations, it's happening outside them. And so we work with startups and accelerators, incubators, individually supporting them, helping them, but also bringing these startups together with corporates, because the strengths of one are often the weaknesses of the other side, and so we really try to bring those people together. So this makes our life really hard in some ways, but on the other hand, it also helps us to see things and these moving parts and considering different things in different ways into problems. And we work around the world. We work across every industry. We work in every continent, both our client locations and the markets we look at. So we have to learn how to become experts at everything, from cars to healthcare to financial services to retail to consumer electronics. We're not experts, but our clients are. But we're experts at understanding how to learn about their business and how to look at their customers. So I bring these things up because I think these are ways you can think about preparing your own design capabilities, whether it's inside yourself, learning, whether it's talking with your colleagues inside your organization, big or small, to really say, hey, are we really designed to deal with the complexity of a changing world? Now let's talk about what is disruption. And I guess second of all, why should you care about disruption? There's a lot of conversation around disruption, and some people say, oh, I don't believe in disruption. Saying you don't believe in disruption is like saying you don't believe in air. It doesn't matter if are you for disruption or are you against disruption? It doesn't matter what my attitude or your attitude is. Disruption is something that is there. Just like aging, it's something we have to deal with. So we really like to look at what is disruption all about. And I'm going to share a little bit of how we think about disruption at Claro. We're going through a lot of massive shifts in the world. They're affecting societies and they're affecting businesses, because society and business are two sides of the same coin, really. The economy and our cultures are, interconnected in many, many ways. So some of these kind of changes are things like moving from a world where ownership was what everyone wanted. I want to own a car. I want to own my home. To maybe, wait a second, maybe just accessing a car is more convenient. I don't have to worry about parking. I don't have to worry about insurance. I don't have to worry about maintenance. I just take a car when I want it. So there's this new dialogue going on about ownership to access. Also is affected by the fact that the world has fewer and fewer resources, more and more people, the streets are more crowded, all these kinds of things that we're dealing with. Another big shift we're seeing is a world where services used to be delivered by one company to all the consumers, just passively waiting with their mouths open like baby birds, feed me with your service. To today, networks where different businesses come together for certain parts of a service. Because again, this network allows us to bring things together. And the people we used to call consumers are no longer happy just being consumers. They want to be participants in that service. They want to play different roles. And so you have to realize that this is a big shift in the world and the way our companies are organized. The scale of them, the orientation of them, and this is something Jordan talked about earlier today, about we start to remove some of these kinds of roles or change what these roles are in business. There's a lot of talk all around the world about big data and aggregating resources, bringing all this data together, and then what are we going to do with that data? We're going to sell it, we're going to target ads at you. How many ads can you have targeted to you? I don't know. There's got to be other ways. And so we believe that a big shift is moving towards taking that data to provide meaningful, personalized experiences for the people who create the data. Give the tools, give the opportunities for people to create their own experiences and learn from their own data. I touched on this already. In the age of industry, which is coming to a very rapid close, we had large hierarchical organizations with the boss at the top and many specialized functions. And those companies were made for doing the same thing over and over at scale. But we're moving into this networked world where what's more important is to be fast, nimble, adaptable, agile. And so it's more like bringing people together for projects now. How can you find the resources you need in the network? Bring all the dream team together. Bring all the experts together to solve problems. And we've already all been very comfortable with the Internet of Information and People. Literally every person and almost every idea in the world can now connect. But what we're coming into now is just the beginning, really getting ready for the birth of the Internet of Things, where also every object, our built environment, everything in the world is going to be added to that conversation. And what happens when all of those things are connected? Because of some of these changes, we used to look at people as markets and segments who had life stages and paths. He is a young man who just got his first job. They are a couple having their first baby. I'm going to buy my house. Now I'm going to retire. But in this world we're in of chaos, of constant change, it's more about switching modes, looking for opportunities, looking for challenges, being ready in a world of flux. This word flux, I think, is very important. We are in a world now of endless change. Change is the new constant, and this flux means it's hard to see who are the segments, what is the life stage. We have to have a different way of looking at people because we have to look at people to understand their needs to bring great services and products to life. So all of these big, massive shifts are in one way or another related to the big shift, the digital revolution. The fact that we are becoming a massively networked society at a global scale. And we're at the very early stages of this, so we're not very good at it yet. And there's a lot of promises out there about the digital world that only give us frustration, really. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. Everyone tells us the future is going to be so great. The advertising for telecoms and consumer electronics companies tells us everything's so wonderful now. But when we get home and we try to make these things work, it's still a pain in the ass, right? So this digital revolution is driven by some common things. One is, because we're all digitally connected, there's a lot of things that are lowering every day, going towards zero. Cost is reducing rapidly. Distance, the idea of being in two different continents and work together is really simple now. Time, how quickly you can do things, and the expectations of how quickly things should happen are going to zero. And the barriers to entry. It's very easy for two smart people in a garage with a good idea to compete with a multinational company if the idea is better. They can move faster to market. At the same time, there's some things increasing. Competition. This barrier to entry is lower. That means more and more competition. When we think about getting away from the industrial organizational metaphor and this new network metaphor that has no center but you can connect to anyone quickly, of course there's going to be more competition. And that's a good thing because 20 people can be focusing on the same idea and the best one, whatever best means, will win. Whether best means fastest, cheapest, works the best for me, the funniest, whatever the best criteria are, we have options to get to that. A lot more information available than ever before, and we have access to that information. Information is practically free, if not always free these days. And we have a transparency. We can compare things. I can look at the price model of this thing versus this thing so the consumer can make more informed decisions. And finally, there's a debundling happening in the world. And by debundling, I'm really talking about the appification of our economy. It used to be companies would bundle a lot of offers together, and that was considered an advantage and something you as a consumer would like. But now we're seeing debundling is better, because if my bank offers 50 different products, but they're all okay in terms of price and how they work, versus me being able to take out my smartphone and find the best way to transfer money, the cheapest, the fastest way, I'm very comfortable, you're all very comfortable going out and finding that app that does one thing really well for you. So that's a huge and drastic change to companies in the world, from saying we can do everything under one roof to a couple guys say, hey, we do one thing, kick ass. So this disruption against industries and experiences, I want to talk about three different ways that we can look at this. First is, again, let's talk about the financial services industry. I mentioned there's all these different products that are served there. Retail banking, corporate banking, payments, insurance and risk management, capital markets, wealth asset management. All these things are being really strongly challenged by startups. And these startups may be relatively small today, but we know there's what's called a hockey stick effect, where it takes the first 2 or 3 years to find their market, find exactly what their offer is, and then scale incredibly. And the financial services industry right now is finding itself, it ignored many of these businesses for a long time, saying they're too small to care about, to a point now where these startups are growing really rapidly, and the banks want to talk to them, to acquire them and partner with them, and these startups now are saying, we don't need you. We wanted you 2 years ago, and you wouldn't talk to us. Now we don't need you as a partner. We don't need you as a customer. We can go directly to the marketplace. There are competitors everywhere. I think everyone's familiar with Uber and what Uber has done to the taxi industry, and what they probably will do to the mass transit industry in the future. And they're going to move forward with autonomous vehicles, perhaps buying an automaker and putting these cars all around the world. What this is going to do to transportation, to our lives, is incredible, but also what it's going to do to established players is going to be incredible. But beyond that, Uber has this secret sauce of this seamless transaction, which is really one of the amazing things about Uber. You get in the car, you take the ride, you get out. No awkward moment at the end, no wondering, am I supposed to tip them or not? And you have this transparency. You can rate the person, but they know how you rate them. They can rate you as a rider. And this creates a kind of a transparency to create fairness in the system. You're not going to completely screw people over with your ratings. But beyond that, they're delivering food. They have food delivery, 10-minute guaranteed food delivery. They also have payment systems that, again, they're stealing directly from the banks. Banks make a lot of money from payments, but in the future, payments are probably just going to be a part of experiences, not something you can charge money for. So they're really affecting the financial services industry. And then finally, there's fundamental changes to other industries, like entertainment, media. I think most of you are familiar with HBO as a brand. Netflix, I'm not sure if you know, but it's a on-demand movie service. Both of these companies are going through massive changes of who their identity is, what their role in the marketplace is, what their mission is, what are they doing for their customers. HBO used to be delivered through cable and satellite companies. Now they're going directly to their customer. They're cutting out that middleman, which we're going to see in a lot of industries, going directly to, here's our offer, there's the audience who wants us, we're going to be available to you anywhere and any way you want. Netflix used to be that delivery service. They would take products, movies, TV shows, and they make it available for you. Now Netflix is producing their own content. They're saying, wait a minute, we have the connection to the customer. We understand what they like. Well, let's start giving them content directly. Now Netflix this year is going to produce more hours of original programming than any of the United States television networks. It's incredible how quickly they've done that. So we can see this kind of disruption I'm talking about. And this means, as designers, our heads can spin. There's a million opportunities, but also there's a million things to think about. So how can we design for this world that's in constant disruption, that's on an ongoing basis, things keep changing? At Claro, we've got 5 principles that I think are very helpful. And I'm going to describe them to you with some examples from our work that I hope can help illustrate it, and then what I really think you can think about, how can you translate it? I doubt what I'm telling you is going to be directly applicable to the work you do, but I do think you can think about the 5 principles and how could you adapt these principles, how could you interpret these principles for the work you do. And I mentioned that we do service design, but I don't care if you're doing products, because products are part of product service systems. I don't care if you're doing pure digital services. I don't care if you're doing physical retail, any kind of a physical service. I think this applies to all this kind of design in the world we're in. So there's 5 of these principles, starting with people, combining macro and micro views, iterating on what we're doing, generating and validating, and designing for the whole person. And on the following pages, we're going to talk about each one of these, and I'll try to give some color, give some examples to these. So first is starting with people. I think for most designers today, this shouldn't be a surprise, starting with people. This idea of being user-centered or human-centered as designers is one that, for most industries, there's still a couple design industries that are a little bit lagging behind in this belief of focusing on the user. But sometimes inside of the companies we work with, we have to convince the people we work with that user-centered is not just a buzzword, but it really has to be the way we go about doing business. Because if you're industry-centered, you can't be user-centered. If you're trying to convince people to buy the product you've already made, you're not user-centered. If you're going out and understanding the needs of the user and then adapting your business, product, service, touch points, communication models around that understanding, then you are user-centered. So we really need to start with real experiences and the real needs of users. There's a lot of ways to get to user needs, but it's important we start there. I don't care how quickly, how rapidly, how much of a guerrilla approach you take, or if you use a very clear, long methodology. But by starting with these user needs and situating these needs inside of real experiences, we can get to solutions. And what I mean by experiences, a need is not just, I need to get to work faster, but what's the experience that I have that need within? Am I in a city like Bangkok? Or am I in a rural town in southern United States? That experience I have is really different. And we need to understand not just the need, but the specific need within that experience so that we can design for it. If we get to these user needs and experiences, then we can find the business opportunity. And I really think this is key. And this is something that we have to fight for because there's a tendency for businesses to push, there's a gold rush mentality. There's something out there. We have to be out in that space. We have to do something. Great, but don't lead with a business model idea. Start off with understanding who are our customers? How does this intersect with their needs? How are our customers experiencing this area that we're talking about? And then we can say, all right, what's the business opportunity for our company? Not just our industry, but our company, because every company has certain geographic markets, certain types of people that are buying their products or services. Every company has certain competencies, areas that they're extremely good at that they can leverage, and they have many incompetencies. Every company is bad at certain things. The brand itself has a certain elasticity. That brand will be accepted in some areas, but not in others. We can think about a company like Google or Apple being accepted in the automotive space, but can you imagine someone like a company that makes candy? Probably not. So we need to think about what are our capabilities and how does that relate. If we really start from this user needs and then align the opportunities, then there's value to be created for both your business and your consumer. We always have to be thinking, are we providing real value in exchange for what we're getting back for our customers? And an ethnographic approach, I believe, is a very good way to do this. But it's not the only way, depending on the kind of product, the time frames, the scale, the pricing model of your business, etc. There's other ways to get to this. But I do believe ethnography, or tools taken from anthropology, but let's be honest, when we practice them in industry, it's no longer anthropology. Anthropologists, by their very nature, they're supposed to go and observe and not affect the cultures and the spaces they're in. We want to affect those spaces. So we're taking tools and methods and philosophies of how to interact with people. The master-apprentice relationship is a key thing that we can take from ethnography, where if I go into someone's home and I want to talk to them about their experience with shaving, they're the master of their life. They're the expert. I'm there as an apprentice, and I'm there to learn from them. We want to be very immersive with them. It's not just about going and doing a survey in someone's home. Any monkey can do that. We want to, well, it's true. What we want to do is really immerse with them. We want them to show us more than tell us. So whatever aspects of the experience you're trying to understand or needs you're trying to uncover, we need to go in there and really try to experience that with them. First-hand observations, explorative, open-ended. Don't just, you really like shaving with a fresh blade, right? No. You want to ask open-ended questions. You want to move your way into the final questions you're trying to get to. Go broad. Understand the overall context before you start asking 20 questions about the particular product or service you're involved in. As I mentioned, letting people do and not just tell, and co-creation. These are opportunities to go into people's homes, bringing tools with you, games, serious play, we like to call it, and have them show you how to do things. Let them draw with you. Show them sketches you have. And they have to be sketches, not 3D renders. Because in the world of 3D renders, all I can say is yes or no. But give me a sketch and a pen, and I can add to that. And that's what you want. You want to understand how would people change or modify things you bring to them. So I really think one way or another, you really need to have a foundation of your work in people. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an example here about some work we did recently with financial services. We worked with 6 international banks to understand how digital natives were working with financial services, or their attitudes about financial services, and how are they organizing their lives. So who are digital natives? We went out and did research in 6 countries with about 70 different people plus experts. We talked to people, all these different experiences they had, and we got to a definition of the digital natives. They're a global generation whose mindset and behaviors are being shaped by network digital technologies on an ongoing basis. And this definition was important because the first piece that's highlighted here, they're a global generation. This is the first generation in the history of mankind where people across every culture, language, geography have more in common than they don't. And that's because you've all been born, if you're under 30 years old, you've all been born with the same tools, a lot of the same media, a lot of the same memes, a lot of the same ways of interfacing with the world. So that's huge. A lot of our clients thought of digital natives as a phase, a step where they're going to grow out of it and become just like their parents, but they're not. They have been shaped by network digital technologies and see the world in a different way than people my age. I'm a digital immigrant, right? And I think a lot of the people in this room who are over 30 and especially over 40 are digital immigrants, but those of us who are information workers, we can get closer to understanding who these digital natives are. But if you talk to people in corporate boardrooms, they're very, very far away from this, and you have to understand how to communicate this. So we wanted to be able to explain in a way that would be valuable to the design process, and I say big D design, designing the offer, the value proposition, the business model. We wanted to understand how this global generation could be designed for. And we realized they have a unique lifestyle, they have unique values and unique behaviors, and we're going to talk very briefly about those. First of all, because they live in this world of flux, as I mentioned before, everything's changed. Here's the old model. I used to pick a path. I'd go to school, pick a path, A, B, or C. Follow that path until retirement. So we would call that, oh, here's your segment. You're a segment A, you're a segment B, or a segment C. There's these convenient little life stops along the way, life stages that we go. I got it. I understand who my customer is. This is out the window. That's not enough to understand digital natives. What we learned is digital natives keep their options open. This world is not available to them. The world has changed so much, they're constantly looking up, like meerkats, looking up to see where's the big opportunity, where's the challenge? How do I avoid the challenge? How do I move to the opportunity? What do I have to do to be ready for that opportunity? This is the new reality. So if we think about that, we realize segmentation no longer is a useful way to think about our customers. My life's in constant flux, so I choose to keep my options open. This is the baseline understanding of this digital native generation. So as we talk to people across different countries, we try to understand what was their lifestyle about. And when I talk about lifestyle, I don't mean a picture from a magazine of kicking back by the pool, having a drink with an umbrella in it. No, we mean what is the style of my life that I have engineered to respond to the fact that I live in a world of constant change. And what we're finding, as they try to keep their options open, we have some stories, specific anchored stories that are very valuable to sell in through the design process. We talked to Cheryl in Singapore. She rejected a 4-year scholarship to Stanford that the Singaporean government was going to give her because she had to come back and work for 3 years in the government. And she said, I don't know who I'll be by the time I finish school, so how can I commit now? So instead, she said, I'm going to pay my own way. We talked to John and Lindsay in Dublin, They're about 30. They have one child, another child on the way, struggling to make ends meet. They don't have a lot of money, but they're already thinking about how they can live abroad. To me, it seems a little bit crazy. It seems like it's not the right time for them to be thinking about this, but they want that flexibility to have different kinds of experiences. And then finally, we talked to Tanner in Istanbul, and his parents put a lot of pressure on him to take over the family business. In his culture, this was very common. You take over the restaurant. And he said, no, I want to find my own way. It created a very, very difficult situation at home, but he really wanted to find his own path. He was very proud he has his own business card. He's an entrepreneur. Not successful, but he wants his own way. So he's really finding his own way. So we look at these kinds of stories to kind of support what we're seeing out there, because if you can give these specific granular stories, people can remember them and take on not just the abstraction of the recommendation, but here's some evidence we're seeing from the field across geographies, across economic levels. So then the values to support that lifestyle were how people make decisions and how they stay on course. We found that there's 3 values that are really leading this generation. When you don't have a path, you need some way to orient yourself day to day. And the way they're doing that is by personal growth, always asking themselves the question, will this help me grow personally? Yes or no? Do I go for or away from it? A sense of purpose. Is this something that fits with my core belief system of where I want to go or what I believe is right? So that helps them also make these choices between which way they should go or not go. And then finally, authenticity. And authenticity here, I mean, does it feel right to me? Do I feel like the company who's talking to me or the opportunity that they're being honest? Does this all make sense? Trusting my stomach, my gut on this. And then finally, what are the behaviors that support those values? This may be familiar to you if you're under 30, investing in yourself. A lot of people who are digital natives are cash poor, but they have other assets. They have knowledge, they have skills, and they have connections. So if I don't have a lot of money, what can I do? I can invest in myself and then leverage all my assets. I may not have money, but hey, I can help you by doing something. I can teach you how to do something. I can connect you. These are different values that people have. And then finally, doing it my own way. It's like, I want to learn to code it. I'm not the best coder in the world, but I can do it myself. So in a story like this, when we're really trying to understand the needs of users, we really have to understand how their behaviors support specific values and a lifestyle that really answers what's going on in the external world. So, people aren't consciously thinking about these things, but there's a lot of older people who think that these digital natives are entitled and are crazy and they have no idea what the world's like. No, they absolutely know what the world's like. They have no one to depend on but themselves. And so that's the model they take. That's the strategy they take. It all makes sense. And if you understand that about these people, you can start figuring out how to communicate with them and develop offers that meet their needs. We're going to come back and talk about that a little bit later, but I want to go into the next thing here, the second principle, which is combining macro and micro views, the big picture and high-resolution granular detail. The way we think about this is exploring opportunities both at this megatrend level. What are the big trends and the things that are affecting any particular situation? This was from a connected car project. Really looking at what are some of the new offers from startups and established players. What's changing in terms of social norms and expectations? We looked at some kind of different kinds of businesses in telematics, autonomous vehicles. What are some of the offers from the big players for connecting you inside your car? Just again, that blocking and tackling of understanding what's happening. But then we want to have high-resolution stories. So we want to go out and recruit people and understand specifically how do individuals experience these things. It's not enough just to know at this level, nor is it just enough to have these stories. These stories are great, but we have to put these stories in the context of what we understand about these trends. Because if you do 6 interviews, your client's not going to say, great, 6 interviews, I'm ready to spend millions of dollars. No, we have to situate this into what the big picture thinking is out there. I guess this is showing up pretty well. We can look in this connected car model of also thinking about what does the connected car mean? It's not a single thing. There's layers to it. So we realize it's the car connecting to me, connecting to myself, my own behaviors, connecting to my car and understanding how the car's running. Also, my passengers, who else is in the car with me? My surroundings, how am I connected? What am I safe? What's around here that might be interesting? Social connection, or the social connections beyond that, the people who are important to me in my life, and finally the world. So we kind of deconstruct what does the connected car mean into several layers. And then we have to go beyond just the landscape and say, what's my objective? What's important to me? So we start to say, right now I'm thinking about discovery. Discovery, probably surroundings. Thinking about safety, passengers, surroundings, car. We think about what are the different scenarios we can start to build from these by combining the need state or the hierarchy of needs at the moment with the landscape that we're in. And then finally, going back to the financial services project I talked about, if it's a global product or service, you need to get a global view. You can't think you or people in your hometown are the universal humans, because they're not. We are similar, but our experiences are quite different from one place to another. So in that financial services project, we went to Singapore, Istanbul, London, Dublin, Mexico City, and Cape Town to look at some very different lifestyles. And we chose to look at 3 different stories across each of those. The first was the transition to independence. So we found people who were just leaving home or just setting up their bank accounts and were starting to pay their own bills. How does that vary? What's similar and what's different from one place to another? The second is we looked at young entrepreneurs and wanted to understand what is the framework of help that they have available to them. What are the problems they have from one place to another? How similar or different is that? And then finally, we wanted to talk to pioneer users. These are people who are just gadget freaks, right? People who say, oh, if there's a new way to do something, I'm on it. And understand what's driving them, what kinds of services and tools are they using. So again, you may not be looking at a global project, but at least if you know that you're looking at something with more than one kind of person, then you want to talk to those different kinds of people in the context of where they live, in their homes, their offices, on the street, wherever you're using your product and service. The third step that I wanted to talk about here, this design principle, is around iteration. And by iteration, I mean don't just jump straight from information to concept. There's a tendency, especially for designers, you're problem solvers, and as soon as you get a little information, you immediately start, oh, I got it, here's the answer, I'm going to build it. Slow down, okay? We start with information, go through perspective, develop a perspective on that information, which leads to insights, and then we can create a concept. Information is just data. Information doesn't show us how to really meet a need state in a differentiated way. So really resist from going directly from information to concept so you can build better insights, and then from that you're going to build better ideas. I'm going to talk about each of these steps so we have a little better idea of what I'm discussing. So first, the information. I talked about this a little bit before. Field work and interviews, this ethnographic approach I talked about people. Secondary research about what's on the market, what's the market landscape look like, what technologies are coming online right now. Expert interviews about people who have different angles of entry to the topic to really give you a broader sense of what's going on in a particular space, and any kind of participant observations. And participants don't have to just be end customers. They could be bank tellers. They could be street sweepers. Anyone who's a stakeholder in a process or an experience are people that you should consider talking to. So we get information there. One of the things we do when we get information is try to capture it in a way that we can use later. Instead of just saying, wow, we went in and had an immersion in a store, and then the next day we say, what happened? I don't really know what we experienced. So plan for it, do it, and then capture. So what we did on a project recently, and this was about defining what does premium mean for a younger generation. We went to a store, for example, one of the immersions was a store in New York City called Rebecca Minkoff, and they're including new kinds of technologies into the retail space. So when we went in, we had a model, a template for capturing information, what to observe and what to capture. We wanted to understand the customer journey in the space, pre-purchase, what was happening in the store, during the purchase process, what's happening, and then finally post-purchase, what's happening. So breaking the process down a little bit, very quick, so that we can capture it in 20 minutes to 30 minutes right after the immersion, and then we have some highlighted observations after that. Some of the things we found was some tensions. So single simple yet evolved. So we find tensions are often very valuable ways to think about designing. Whenever there's a tension, that means there's an opportunity to solve a problem for people. So having some sort of a template when you talk to people or go observe things, you can capture this while it's still fresh in your mind, and you go back later, you'll have many experiences that are framed in somewhat the same way, which makes it easier to start to developing insights from that. So after you've gone out and you've gathered your information, you can start developing your perspective. You start to filter the data. You extract what's the most relevant seeming information based on your client organization, based on the problem. You start separating what was interesting to you personally to what's relevant for the problem you're trying to solve. You organize the pattern, start to group things, and then regroup things, and then regroup things, and then regroup things, because it takes a long time to find out the right ways to group information. And then you start to identify those unmet needs and those desired experiences. Using journey maps, process flows, things like that. Where are specific places we can improve things? Where there is a particular information gap and things like that. Example here, going back to the work I did for the customer journey for automobiles, we looked outside of the automobile industry because our client was obsessed with how GM and Toyota customer experience was. And we said, well, guess what? It's a little bit better than yours, but they all suck. So we said, let's go to other kinds of retail experience to see where is it that people are really getting their expectations of what retail should be like. Not in the auto industry. So we started looking across other industries and started to see what some of the key themes. And a couple of themes that we came up with, for example, were moving from the business controlling how that journey unfolds to giving control to the customer. The customer decides how they want to control it. And we realized that was a big problem for the automotive industry because you go into an auto dealership and they start you from zero. They have their way of selling. And they say, don't worry, little lady, I know just the car for you. And it's really completely wrong for the way we expect our retail experiences to be today. Or another one here was talking at the customer to becoming a trusted advisor. In a world where we have things like a Genius Bar at the Apple Store, and you expect someone to come down and just work with you and solve your problem and not try to sell to you, that's another thing we saw. So we looked for, in each case, a key example outside of the market, and then looked for anyone inside the auto industry that was doing it well. Those analogies, both outside and inside, are very valuable ways to get people behind you. Say, okay, I believe it, I understand it. They need specific evidence, so give them some. That helps you get to that perspective. What's particularly valuable from the information you have for this problem you're trying to solve? So from there, we start developing insights. What are the most meaningful connections? I've got this piece of information, this piece of information. What happens when I put them together? Aha, that's where the magic starts to happen. That's where we can say we're moving from analysis to synthesis or the creation. I often think of the first two steps, the information and perspective, are like breaking everything down in all the different Legos, and then in insights, we start putting the Legos together in new ways. What can we do? I know designers love that piece of it. Designers love starting to build things, but you're going to build something a lot better if you go through this process before you start doing it. So in insights, we're defining the opportunities. We're looking at building frameworks to understand what the company should do or what the product or service should look like, and then you make some choices. You start making choices. What can we take action on right now? And an example here is a couple of frameworks. I hope I can explain these. They're always really difficult when you haven't been on the project with me. But these are from a project we did with a fast-moving consumer goods company. They wanted to get into the sports nutrition, functional food space. So a couple things that we found were really super helpful to determine where they should play, what should that product look like, was the top one here. We understood that there was two different trends in functional food. And when I say functional food, I mean things like sports bars, sports drinks, any kind of a food that has a +1 functionality it gives you beyond just nutrition. So there's one trend which is about technological perfection of food, turning food into science. I don't know if those of you can relate to that, but things where it says it's going to work directly at your DNA level or feed your cells and these kinds of things. So people really love this food as science. But on the other hand, at least in North America and Western Europe, there's this return to whole food or a return to nature. Those things are really different. And we thought it's really interesting that there's this tension between food as science and a return to nature. But we realized there's an opportunity to try to resolve those two things. So we told our client, don't choose one or the other. Let's find a way to bring these together. Because then we're going to help resolve. People in the store, they're asking themselves, oh, which do I do? Do I go the science route or do I get the whole foods? Well, this is an apple. Nothing's better than just an apple. But this one has all this technology on the bottle. So help them not have to make that choice. Let them choose. Say, oh, wow, this is great. It gives me the high-tech food, but it's all natural as well. So we realized a framework like this helped us see that. And just a quick note on frameworks. Frameworks, I think of as just being sketches, conceptual diagrams to explain things that are real but invisible, right? We can't see this in the marketplace. We had to understand that in the marketplace there was these two things. We had examples of different kinds of food. We had hundreds of examples of this food, and we laid them out in different ways. And then we were able to start saying, what's the similar about these? What's different about these? And it got us to this diagram. So this is not something you rarely even show to our clients because it's too complex. We more tell a story about it. But it's a way for us to work through very intangible but important things as a team. So I really suggest using frameworks. Don't think of them as being the end of the road. They're just a model to help you think. And the other model in that project that was valuable is to think, our client was thinking very much about sports optimization. Typical Americans, half of our team were marathon runners or some sort of crazy competitive sport. They get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym and things like that. They thought they were average. And they thought they were designing food for themselves. But they weren't. Because we realized this market for sports optimization, before the workout, during the workout, directly after the workout, is a very small market. There's not that many people who really live that lifestyle. And also, we found that there's a lot of products already in that space because they've been designed by more freaks like our clients, right? But we did research in the US, Brazil, and Japan, and what we found across the board, everyone's concerned about a more general well-being, emotional health, physical health, mental health. And we said, you can either zero in on the sports optimization or broaden out and say, we're going to help you have more wellness in your overall life. And again, at the end of the day, they had to make the decision, but we came up with this framework to explain what choice they could make. Ultimately, we got to convince them here, but I still think they weren't happy with it. They really wanted to create products for themselves, and this is a big problem that you'll find with your teams. Finally, once we've gone through information, developed a perspective on that, and started creating ways to get the core insights, we go to concept. Now, you can make things. Yay, finally. But you know what's going to happen? And our client told us on that functional food project that the reason they liked working with us on the project was instead of coming in and say, let's brainstorm and come up with 80 ideas, we came up with 3 ideas that they felt really met the need. They really felt strong about the ideas. They just had to check the technological and business feasibility to make sure that we could take them forward. So instead of making a million ideas and you don't really know why, you've got a reason for the decision. You can defend your design decisions to whoever you're talking with. So we use those insights and frameworks, insight-based ideation. We produce concepts that are meaningful to the target users as well as to the business. And then finally, I think this is most important, is prototype, don't illustrate. As much as possible, prototype. Today, especially when we're in the physical and digital world, as Jordan mentioned, we have all kinds of tools to rapidly prototype things, whether they're appearance prototypes or kludgy working prototypes. In the digital space, it's even easier. You don't even have to know anything about coding, barely know anything about design to be able to create functional prototypes. Give people things to put in their hands. Don't just show them a story, but give them things. You can start to see when you're prototyping where are the holes in your thinking, but you can also get people really excited when you hand something to them and they play with it, and they can start contributing to your idea. And when your client or a commissioner of the work you're doing gets excited about the idea and starts contributing, they're going to champion that idea, and there's a better chance that idea is going to go forward. So this piece here about the iteration, this is the way I mean. Don't just go from information straight to concept, but be more disciplined. Make sure you have evidence to support the ideas that you come up with, and you're going to have more confidence. When someone challenges you, you're going to have the reason why your idea is a good idea, and you're probably going to get more of your products through to development and production. The fourth step here is generate and validate. And here, what I mean is, there's two different aspects of innovation. The first is this qualitative approach, which really is about inspiration. And the second is, yeah, but how big is the opportunity? And both of those things are really important. I have them listed here as the qualitative first and the quantitative second, but it could be the other way around. It really depends on the situation. Qualitative helps us understand why. What is it that we want to produce for people? Why are we making this choice rather than another choice? It helps to inspire us, and it helps us to generate ideas. Quantitative approaches help us to understand what exactly is the size of the market, what is it that's being attractive to people in terms of pure numbers, and it helps to validate this idea. And again, wrapping this quantitative with the qualitative is very important. We often tell stories when we give recommendations. We use our design practice to create narratives, whether those are videos or storyboards or prototypes, mock-ups, speculative fiction videos and things like that. But we always have to know exactly where do we drop the numbers in. Where are people going to say, yes, but how many people do that? Or yes, but how, who else is doing that? And you have to drop those in just before people ask the question. But I really believe lead with the qualitative story, but never forget the quantitative numbers need to be there, because certain people in the company, that's how they think. That's what's going to give them comfort to move forward. And finally, design for the whole person. So going back to our young lady from South Africa here, going back to this idea of the behaviors and the values and the lifestyle, we developed in this particular project some design principles for how financial services companies could connect with digital natives. And I'm going to talk about these, but the first layer was this idea of being simple, easy in, easy out, and being genuine. The second level was participatory, give people a role, and be customizable, and be responsive. And finally, something we call Me Plus. I'm going to talk about these on the next 3 slides. So first, we just have to be in their consideration set. The first rule, because digital natives don't care about banks, we have to get them even to think about it. Think, hey, I'm over here. Hey. So how do we get them to consider us? Make it simple. Banks generally are not good at that. Give them something simple. I get the value proposition. Oh, I understand what you're offering to me, how it fits in my life. Easy in, easy out. Banks also are not good at this. Banks want to lock you in. They want to get you and keep you. And we're saying the best way to get someone to try something and make sure that it's easy for them to get back out. You have to compete on the quality of your solution, not by hoping you can trap them. And third, be genuine. If you say something, you have to live up to that promise. Your advertising can't be off from what your reality of your product is. So that was just getting people to consider you. Second, so here's some examples, which I do not have time to go into, but I do think I want to mention examples are great because, again, it anchors it into something specific. If we just provided this level, it's too abstract. So we can say, hey, here's some examples of businesses in your industry that are doing this well. Oh, I get it. Thanks. That's helpful. So analogs inside and outside of industry to make your point so people can understand specifically what you mean. The second ring here was add meaning to their experience. So if you get them to consider you and they have their first interaction with you, how do you make sure they'll want to come back? How do you keep them? And you don't keep them by trying to trap them. You treat them by giving them a role. Especially digital natives, they don't want to just be consumers. They want some kind of a role. Second is to be customizable, and I don't mean just the interface, but based on the context. What time of day? Where am I? What's the season like? What's the weather like? What's my task right now? Where am I thinking about things like that? And finally, responsive. And by responsive, I don't mean responsive design, digital design. I mean agile. When you deliver something into the marketplace, you immediately start following on social media, what are people saying about it, reaching out to your customers to understand their approach, and get ready to have that next version out in a couple weeks. What are the key things that people love about it? Amplify that. What are the problems with it? Get rid of it. So here are some examples of how people can play a role, etc. And then finally, the big thing here, people are looking for, digital natives are looking for ways to be more. They're cash poor, but they have other capabilities. They have skills, they have knowledge, they have other things of value. Help them leverage that. So we called that Me Plus. And here we gave an example of a company called Upstart, which is a clever play on words of startup. But Upstart addresses all their assets and their potential. So it really kind of looks at who do you know, what can you teach, who are your connections, these kinds of things, and creates value out of that. So that's a way we can take specific design principles and make them tangible and specific to the problem and the people we're talking about. So, I have 20 seconds left. So, if you remember nothing else, the world is becoming a single, massive digital network of people, ideas, places, and things. This creates a very, very chaotic world we're trying to design for. I talked about these before. These are all manifestations of this digital revolution that we're living through, the early days of. There'll be many, many more of these, but come back to it. It's about being part of a networked world, and that networked world is very different than the world that came before it. This fundamental shift requires underlying business models and cultural norms to change. So, we have to rethink everything. When I talk about what's coming down, what's going up, we need to think about that. Even as designers, you need to be thinking about what these changes mean for the experiences we're designing. Living in a digital world leads to new lifestyles, new values, and new behaviors, as I hope I outlined before with our digital natives. So this old linear model and looking at segmentations and life paths doesn't really work sufficiently anymore. Instead, we need to think about this world of flux and how do we help people navigate when they're in the middle of the chaos. So we can design for a world of flux. We start with people. We combine macro and micro views. We iterate through the process to get to the best ideas. We generate. We get that inspiration for the ideas and validate. We have to go beyond just designerly thinking to make sure that these ideas are going to work in the commercial world. And we want to design for the whole person across the experience. And remember, they're not thinking about your product or service except for a few minutes or maybe a few seconds a day. Thank you very much.
What's kind of like the most challenging problem that you face dealing with clients in terms of trying to get them to think differently or operate differently?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is to make sure we're communicating the right things to them. Quite honestly, I find not just my own organization, but I've seen this many times, many human-centered design firms are great at understanding the human that is the customer, but crap at understanding the human that is the client. Right? Does that sound familiar to anyone? We think of ourselves as advocates for the customer, but we almost feel adversarial sometimes to our clients, and I think that's arrogant and stupid. So I think we need to understand, some of the things I showed you today, like the frameworks, those are not necessarily ready to be presented to a customer, right? Those are internal thinking tools. What we need to do then, turn that into maybe a photograph and one line to make a recommendation. Then when they challenge us on it, if they don't believe the recommendation, we can go to a whiteboard and draw it out real quickly, but be subtle, give them the key information they need. I also think with design, sometimes when you have a lot of people who are really analytical and synthetic, we love all our ideas, and we put too many ideas in and at the same level. You realize if you're presenting to a client, maybe there's one or two key things and there's a few supporting things. So really be rigorous to understand what's the objective of the meeting with the client, what do you want to get out of that meeting, and so what do they need to know to be able to get to that outcome and remove as much stuff that's not necessary. You have it in your brain, so if the conversation goes that way, trust yourself, trust your team that you'll be able to talk about those things.
So you mean that it should be focused?
Try to be focused as much as possible. And, it's never, the more conversations you have with your customer, and I don't care if you're a consulting firm or internal, the more touch points, the more you're closely with them, there's fewer surprises when you meet with them. I think the worst thing to do is go have what we call the Disney effect, right? Ta-da! The old advertising model. Because there's a high chance you're going to unveil this thing and you're so excited and it's going to go wah, wah, wah. So when you present something, it should just be the rubber stamp at the end of the project. Your client and probably up the stream to their clients should know every step of the way where we're going, a lot of close touch points. So at the end, it's about just wrapping things up. This was great. Thanks. What are the next steps? And things like that, rather than trying to wow them in that old-fashioned design way.
What are your views on emerging markets, especially in Southeast Asia? There are disruptions in all markets, but each one has different characteristics.
Yeah, it's true. I think it would depend on what kind of product, what kind of service we're talking about. I was working with a global retailer, direct marketing company, and we did some work in Russia, and they were leveraging some work from from Latin America. So similar kind of developmental level as Southeast Asia, but people in Thailand and Vietnam would not at all buy. They just wouldn't buy that these insights and the recommendations were relevant for them. I think there probably is some localization that would have to happen on the work we did, but ultimately, I think the work is valid. Sometimes people just have to see it in their own market to believe it. So there's a perception issue, but then sometimes there is a reality. So I'm not sure how to answer it specifically. It really depends on the service. But as I say, with digital natives, if we're talking about digital products, people under 30 are more similar in their habits and ways of thinking about things digitally than than people older. But what's happening too, the conventions are being set by these digital natives, and older people are becoming infected by this attitude. So even people 40, 50, 60, 70 are starting to have those same kinds of thinking and attitudes as the young people. I would say a couple things that are important to think about is situations such as where do you fit on the scale from individual to communal society? I think those are huge issues, right? In the West, we have this mythology of being the cowboy, or on our own. And in in Asia, you have this myth of it's all about the community. Well, of course, there's some reality to both of those stories, but there's some, again, just perception. But understanding how things are thought of in terms of a community versus an individual would be something that would be very important in Southeast Asia, I think.
In your point of view, what is the most hardest factor when taking disruption in action?
I think maybe distilling it down to what is the aspect of disruption that's most important to this particular issue. Because as I showed you, there's a lot of things, and they're all connected. The world is connected. The world does not live in a place where there's just one trend that affects one product or service and one customer, right? But we have to simplify to be able to, first of all, create a brief and design to it and tell a story. So I guess that would be one of the things, is just distilling what's the most important thing for this particular experience. And then if I can have a second one, I would say the fact that things are changing. Things are constantly changing, and we need to be designing for 18 to 36 months out, not for the circumstances they are today. So when we talk to customers, we try to find these edge cases that maybe predict what may more be mass behaviors in the future, or circumstances more people might share in the future. So we don't ask people what they'll do in the future. We try to find people that might show more of the behaviors of the future.